my wife confessed. I've been sleeping with your business partner for months. It's liberating to finally tell you, I replied. I know. Go on. Tell me more, she asked. Why aren't you angry? I said. Because your lover doesn't realize his company now belongs to me. His house I foreclosed and your sister who covered for you is now completely jobless. They say betrayal cuts the deepest, right? But what if that cut doesn't break you, it hardens you? What if it turns a man who built an empire into a ruthless architect of pure, unadulterated vengeance? Because that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Vincent Nielsen, and I didn't build my real estate empire, Meridian Properties, by being soft. No, at 45, I had the sharp instincts of a predator, always simmering just beneath my tailored suits and that gentle charm people talked about. Meridian wasn't just a company. It was Phoenix's most formidable development corporation, an empire I'd built from the ground up. I was looking at a model of my latest, a $3 billion luxury complex, the largest in Arizona's history. And for a rare moment I smiled. Then my assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Nielsen, your wife is online. It was Laurel. Her voice, usually so musical, had developed a brittle edge lately. Don't forget the Harrison fundraiser, she reminded me. Have you confirmed with the Falcos? Brady said they'll meet us there, but Dominic mentioned he might be late. Something about finalizing the Westlake acquisition. My jaw tightened. Dominic Falco. My business partner of 7 years. He'd brought capital and ruthless efficiency that perfectly complemented my calculated approach. Tell him not to be late, I snapped. The senator doesn't appreciate tardiness. I'm not your secretary, Vincent. Laurel shot back, and the sharpness in her tone made me pause. I looked at my reflection in the window. When had the admiration in her eyes dulled? 15 years of marriage, from passionate to, well, routine, and lately, something disturbingly cold. I'll see you at home, I said, ending the call before she could reply. Hours later, I walked into our Paradise Valley mansion, a modernist monument of glass and stone. Silence. Just the faint sound of water running from the master suite. In the bedroom, Laurel's phone lay on the unmade bed. I rarely invaded her privacy, not out of respect, but because I'd never felt the need. I trusted no one, but I controlled everything. Betrayal? In my world, it seemed implausible. The notification that illuminated her screen changed that calculation instantly. A text from Dominic. Can't wait to feel you again. Make an excuse tonight. My place after. I stood there, frozen, Laurel's phone burning in my hand. My world, it didn't just crumble, it crystallized. Something ancient and cold formed inside me. Was I surprised by the betrayal itself? Not really. In my world, loyalty was always conditional. But that raw, white-hot flicker of pain I felt? That surprised me. Before it was completely swallowed by something far, far more potent, a calculated rage. I placed the phone exactly as I'd found it, then walked to my study and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I didn't plot hasty revenge. No. My mind worked like the architect I once was, designing a structure of vengeance so meticulous that by the time its scaffolding became visible, it would already be too late for those caught within it. Foundations of deceit. 3 months passed. 3 months of silent, controlled observation. I never confronted Laurel about that text. Instead, I watched. I waited. Documenting their patterns with clinical detachment. Tuesday afternoons. Thursday evenings, when I had standing meetings with overseas investors. Sunday mornings, when I supposedly played golf. The affair operated like clockwork, and I couldn't decide what disgusted me more, the betrayal itself, or its predictable banality. In my private office, the files from my private investigator lay open. Photos of Laurel entering Dominic's penthouse. Screenshots of texts detailing their liaison. Call logs. Hotel receipts. A comprehensive dossier of infidelity. Mr. Nielsen? Benjamin Hayward. My longtime attorney, the closest thing I had to a friend, entered. You said it was urgent. I gestured to the chair across from me. I need to restructure Meridian's ownership. Benjamin's weathered face registered concern. At 67, he'd been with me since the beginning. Is there something I should know? Dominic is sleeping with my wife. Benjamin didn't flinch. In our world, such revelations were disappointingly common. Do you have proof? I slid the folder across the desk. Enough to bury them both. Benjamin examined the contents, his expression grim. What's your play? I want everything. His shares, his properties, his dignity. The partnership agreement gives him significant protection, as does your prenuptial agreement with Laurel. I smiled thinly. Legal agreements are just words on paper, Ben. And words can be reinterpreted. Over the next 2 hours, we outlined a strategy that would make Machiavelli proud. I'd always maintained multiple corporate structures, ownership stakes hidden within layers of LLCs and offshore entities. Now, these would become weapons. The Westlake acquisition, I said, referencing Dominic's pet project. I want control transferred to High Point Holdings. Benjamin frowned. Dominic doesn't know you control High Point. Exactly. We'll structure it as a joint venture. When the deal closes next month, ownership reverts fully to High Point under the secondary clause, which I doubt he's read closely. And his home. The mortgage is through Meridian Finance. I want to call on the loan. Benjamin removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Vincent, this is extreme. Have you considered simply divorcing Laurel and buying out Dominic's shares? I leaned forward, my voice quiet. When someone takes what's mine, I don't negotiate. I annihilate. What I didn't share was the deeper wound beneath my rage. Before Laurel, before my fortune, I'd watched my father, a small contractor, lose everything when his business partner emptied their accounts and disappeared. The bankruptcy, the foreclosure, my father's subsequent suicide. These had forged my pathological need for control and my merciless response to betrayal. After Benjamin left, I opened my desk drawer. Inside lay the diamond earrings I'd bought for Laurel's upcoming birthday. I snapped the box shut and dropped it into the trash. That night at dinner, I watched Laurel pushing food around her plate, her raven hair obscuring part of her face. Once, I would have reached across to tuck it behind her ear. Now, I simply observed the stranger my wife had become. The Westlake closing is next month, I said casually. Dominic seems confident we'll double our investment within 2 years. Laurel looked up, her fork pausing midair. That's good news. He's been putting in a lot of hours on it. A flash of something, guilt perhaps, crossed her features. He's always been dedicated. Dedicated? I repeated, swirling the wine in my glass. Yes, Dominic has always taken what he wants, hasn't he? Later, a text arrived from an unknown number, package delivered. All systems operational. The surveillance equipment had been installed in Dominic's penthouse. Now I would have eyes and ears in the inner sanctum of their betrayal. The invisible hand Melissa Porter, Laurel's sister, prided herself on being a good sister. So, when Laurel had tearfully confessed her affair with Dominic 6 months ago, Melissa had provided alibis, excuses, and emotional support. You deserve to be happy, Melissa had assured her. Vincent treats you like another acquisition. Now, seated across from me in a discreet corner of an upscale restaurant, Melissa felt a chill despite the warm Arizona evening. Thank you for meeting me, I said, my tone pleasant but my eyes cold. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. You said it was about Laurel's birthday surprise. In a manner of speaking. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Open it. Inside were photos, Melissa dropping Laurel off at Dominic's building. Melissa answering Laurel's phone while her sister showered after a rendezvous. Melissa lying directly to my face about Laurel's whereabouts. I can explain. She stammered, her face draining of color. No need. My smile never reached my eyes. You're fired. Effective immediately. Melissa's position as marketing director at one of my subsidiary companies had been her dream job. You can't. I already have. Security has packed your office. Your access was revoked 20 minutes ago. This is because I protected my sister from you. I leaned forward. This is because loyalty matters to me, Melissa, and you chose the wrong side. I'll tell Laurel everything. I'll expose what you're doing. My tone was almost bored. Tell her how you've been helping her deceive me. Tell her how you've lost your job and your reputation. Tell her whatever you want, and make sure to mention that I know everything. Melissa left the restaurant in tears. I calmly finished my scotch. The first domino had fallen exactly as planned. That night, Laurel stormed into my study, eyes blazing. You fired my sister because, what? She didn't kiss your ring properly at the charity gala? I barely looked up from my computer. Your sister's performance has been substandard for months. The decision was made by the board. Bullshit. You control that board like you try to control everything else. I finally met her gaze. Careful, Laurel. Your concern for your sister's job performance seems disproportionate. Something in my tone made her pause. What does that mean? Nothing at all. I returned to my work. Perhaps she should have been more discreet in her professional conduct. After Laurel left, I pulled up the surveillance feed from Dominic's penthouse. Right on schedule, my business partner was on the phone, pacing nervously. She's suspicious, Dominic was saying. Her sister just got fired. Yes, of course, I think it's connected. No, he couldn't possibly know about us. I've been careful. I zoomed in on Dominic's face, studying the fear etched there. The man who had taken my wife would soon learn the true cost of his betrayal, but not yet. I was still laying the groundwork, still positioning my pieces. The next morning, I called Howard Byrne, CEO of First Arizona Bank and a longtime business associate. Howard, remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. By afternoon, Dominic's personal credit lines had been frozen, pending a routine review. By evening, rumors of Meridian facing liquidity issues began circulating among a select group of investors, ones who, coincidentally, held significant positions in Dominic's pet projects. I worked methodically, invisibly, applying pressure points that would initially seem like unfortunate coincidences. Dominic's assistant quit suddenly. The permit process for his passion project, a boutique hotel in Scottsdale, hit unexpected delays. Small things, but they would accumulate. Meanwhile, I increased my attentiveness to Laurel, sending flowers, suggesting dinner dates, behaving like a husband trying to rekindle a marriage. The confusion on her face was palpable. And that confusion would soon turn to fear as my trap began to close around her and her lover. Tightening the noose, the annual Meridian Properties Gala was Phoenix's premier corporate event. I stood at the center of it all, champagne flute in hand, the picture of success in my bespoke tuxedo. To another record-breaking year. I announced to the assembled crowd, raising my glass. And to new beginnings. My gaze found Laurel across the room, stunning in an emerald gown. Beside her stood Dominic, handsome and charismatic, wearing the confident smile of a man who believed himself untouchable. If only they knew that tonight marked the beginning of their end. I navigated through the crowd, accepting congratulations. When I finally approached Laurel and Dominic, I embraced my business partner with practiced warmth. The man of the hour, Dominic said, clapping me on the shoulder. The Westlake deal alone will put us on the national map. About that, I replied, lowering my voice conspiratorially. I've been meaning to discuss some adjustments to the structure. Dominic's smile faltered slightly. Adjustments? Everything's set for closing next week. Nothing significant, just some tax considerations my team has raised. We'll discuss it Monday. Before Dominic could press further, I turned to Laurel, taking her hand and brushing my lips against her knuckles. You outshine everyone here. The confusion in her eyes was delicious. For weeks now, I'd been alternating between cold indifference and unexpected tenderness, keeping her off balance, making her question whether her affair remained undiscovered. Dance with me, I said, not waiting for her response before leading her to the dance floor. As we moved to the music, bodies close but spirits separated by a chasm of deceit, I whispered in her ear. You smell like his cologne. Laurel stiffened in my arms. What? Dominic's cologne? It's distinctive, isn't it? Sandalwood and something else. Citrus, perhaps? The color drained from her face. Vincent, not here. I murmured, maintaining my smile for the benefit of watching eyes. Not now, but soon. We'll have a very interesting conversation, you and I. The remainder of the dance passed in tense silence, Laurel's body rigid with fear. When the music ended, I escorted her back to our table, where Dominic waited with a brittle smile. Everything all right? He asked, noticing Laurel's pallor. Perfect, I replied, my hand resting possessively on Laurel's bare shoulder. I was just telling my wife how grateful I am for her loyalty. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. By afternoon, the rumors I'd strategically planted weeks ago had bloomed into full-blown concerns about Dominic's financial stability. The board, primed by my subtle manipulations, voted unanimously to restructure the Westlake deal, removing Dominic as lead and transferring primary oversight to High Point Holdings. When Dominic burst into my office later that day, his composure had evaporated entirely. What the hell is going on? He demanded, slamming the door. You've undermined me with the board, frozen me out of Westlake, And now my bank accounts are being audited. I regarded him calmly from behind my desk. Business is unpredictable, Dominic. Surely you understand that. This isn't business. This is personal. What have I done to deserve this? I stood slowly, walking to the bar cart to pour 2 glasses of whiskey. What have you done? An interesting question from a man who's been sleeping with my wife for the past 7 months. The blood drained from Dominic's face. Vincent, I can explain. No explanations necessary. I handed him a glass with a smile that chilled the room. In fact, I should thank you. You've shown me a vulnerability in my organization that needed addressing. Now I'm correcting it. Is that what this is? A correction? Dominic's hand trembled as he set down the untouched drink. Vincent, we can resolve this like businessmen. I'll end things with Laurel. I'll sell you my shares at a discount. Generous, but inadequate. I returned to my desk, pressing a button on my phone. Security will escort you out. Your access has been revoked and your personal items will be delivered to your home. You can't just push me out. I own 20% of Meridian. Actually, I opened a folder on my desk. As of this morning, your shares have been transferred to cover your outstanding obligations to our subsidiary, High Point Holdings. It seems you signed quite a disadvantageous agreement during the Westlake restructuring. Dominic stared in disbelief as security entered the office. This isn't over, Vincent. Oh, but it is. I smiled coldly. And Dominic, I'd start packing. The bank is foreclosing on your penthouse tomorrow. That evening, I returned home earlier than usual. I found Laurel in our bedroom, frantically packing a suitcase, her face streaked with tears. Going somewhere? I asked, leaning against the door frame. She flinched, turning to face me with a mixture of fear and defiance. I'm leaving you. Because I fired your lover today? Or because your sister lost her job covering for your affair? Laurel's hands froze on the clothing she'd been folding. How long have you known? Long enough to ensure that neither of you will ever recover. I moved into the room, my presence filling the space. Your lover has lost his company's shares. His home is being foreclosed, and his reputation in this city is finished. You're a monster, she whispered. No, Laurel. I'm simply a man who collects what he's owed. The confession the Nielsen house had never felt so suffocating. For 3 days after my revelation, Laurel remained trapped by shock and the sudden realization that her escape routes had been systematically eliminated. Dominic wasn't answering her calls. Melissa was unreachable, having apparently left town. And Laurel's own bank accounts, joint with mine, had been restricted to nominal withdrawals. I continued my routine, leaving for work each morning and returning each evening as if nothing had changed. I spoke to her with cold civility, watching her deterioration with detached interest. On the 4th night, Laurel found herself in our kitchen at midnight, a glass of wine in one hand, her phone in the other, staring at Dominic's unanswered texts. The sound of my footsteps made her look up. I stood in the doorway, dressed in silk pajama bottoms and nothing else. My physique a reminder of the power that had once attracted her to me. Can't sleep? I asked, moving to pour myself a glass of water. How can you act like this is normal? Her voice cracked. Like we're just having a rough patch. I leaned against the counter, studying her. What would you prefer? That I rage, break things, beg you to love me again? I want you to feel something. Laurel slammed her glass down. Anything human. I feel plenty, I replied calmly. Disappointment. Disgust. A profound desire to see justice served. Justice? She laughed bitterly. You've destroyed lives out of wounded pride. I moved closer, my presence overwhelming. You misunderstand. This isn't about pride. It's about consequences. Actions have them. Yours, Dominic's, Melissa's, all of you made choices knowing the risks. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Another lie. I shook my head. You meant exactly that. The affair was your rebellion against everything I represent. The truth of my words struck her like a physical blow. Her relationship with Dominic had begun as an escape from my controlled world, a way to feel something spontaneous and passionate again. But it had evolved into something deeper. Or so she believed. He said he loved me, she admitted quietly. And you believed him? My smile held genuine pity. Dominic loves opportunity, Laurel. You were simply his way to get closer to my company, my connections. Did you really think it was coincidence that he pursued you right as the Westlake deal was coming together? The doubt that had been gnawing at her expanded. Dominic's increasing distance over the past weeks. His focus on business calls even during their intimate moments. His insistence on knowing my schedule and business plans. You're lying, she said. But her conviction had faltered. Am I? I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen before sliding it toward her. Listen for yourself. The recording played clearly in the silent kitchen. Dominic's voice, speaking to someone unknown. Vincent doesn't suspect a thing. His wife gives me everything I need to know about his movements, his plans. Once the Westlake deal closes, we'll have everything we need to push him out completely. Laurel's world collapsed around her. The betrayal she'd committed paled against the one she now faced. When was this? Last month. Your lover has been playing you as thoroughly as you've been playing me. The wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. I didn't move to help as she knelt, mindlessly trying to gather the broken pieces, cutting her finger in the process. I've been such a fool, she whispered, watching blood mix with wine. Yes, I agreed dispassionately. The question is, what will you do now? Laurel looked up at me, broken in ways that transcended the physical. What choices do I have left? You've taken everything. Not everything. Not yet. I crouched beside her, careful of the glass. I want complete honesty, Laurel. Every detail of your betrayal, every plan Dominic shared, every person who knew and helped. Give me that and perhaps we can discuss arrangements. And if I refuse? My expression hardened. Then I continue dismantling everything and everyone you care about piece by piece until nothing remains. The next morning, I sat in my home office recording Laurel's full confession. For hours, she detailed the affair, how it began with a chance meeting when I was overseas, how Dominic had pursued her relentlessly, how she'd eventually surrendered to the excitement he offered. She confessed Melissa's role, the alibis provided, the excuses made, even the times she'd lied directly to my face on Laurel's behalf. She revealed the network of enablers, the hotel concierge who'd been bribed, the restaurant maitre d' who'd arranged private dining rooms, even my former assistant who'd altered my calendar occasionally. Most valuable were Dominic's confidences, business strategies he planned, leverage positions I wasn't supposed to know about, and most damning, his connection to a rival development group that had been suspiciously well informed about Meridian's confidential plans. When she finished, emotionally exhausted and morally bankrupt, I simply nodded and stopped the recording. What happens now? She asked, her voice raw. No, I replied. We have a conversation that's long overdue. The reckoning. The penthouse apartment where Dominic had taken Laurel countless times now felt like a mausoleum. Most of his possessions had been packed into boxes, the furniture covered with sheets. The foreclosure notice had arrived that morning, giving him 48 hours to vacate. His phone rang. Laurel's ringtone. After days of ignoring her calls, something made him answer. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Vincent knows everything. I'm aware, Dominic replied bitterly. He's systematically destroying me. He wants to see us. Both of us. Tonight. Dominic laughed hollowly. So he can gloat? No thanks. He says he's willing to negotiate. To give you back your shares, stop the foreclosure. The desperation in her voice matched his own internal state. After days of fruitless attempts to salvage his business interests, of watching his assets frozen and his reputation tarnished, even a slim hope seemed worth pursuing. Fine. Where? The house. The Nielsen residence, a modernist palace that Dominic had once envied, now loomed before him like a fortress of doom. As the security gate opened automatically, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert evening breeze. Inside, I waited in my study. Laurel, already seated on one of the leather sofas, looking small and defeated. I, by contrast, appeared completely at ease, offering Dominic a drink as if welcoming an old friend. Scotch? You always preferred the Macallan 25, as I recall. Dominic remained standing. Let's skip the pleasantries. Laurel said you're willing to negotiate, did she? I glanced at my wife. That's not precisely what I said, but no matter. Please sit. Once Dominic reluctantly took a seat across from Laurel, I began. I've spent the last few days reviewing the damage you've both inflicted. The lies, the betrayal, the attempted corporate espionage. Yes, Dominic, I know about your meetings with Apex Development. Dominic's face registered shock before he could compose himself. That was just exploratory. Nothing came of it, because I intercepted your communications before anything could. I sipped my drink. Nevertheless, the intent was clear. What do you want from us? Laurel asked, her voice barely audible. I want what was taken from me. Respect, loyalty, control? I placed my glass down carefully. But since those are intangibles, I'll settle for watching you both lose everything, as you intended for me. I've already lost everything, Dominic exclaimed. My shares, my home, my reputation. Not everything, I interrupted coldly. Not yet. I pressed a button on a remote and a large television screen on the wall illuminated with a video feed. Dominic and Laurel, in his penthouse, in the most private of moments. Jesus, Vincent! Laurel gasped, covering her mouth. Oh, I have hours of this, I continued conversationally. Quite comprehensive documentation of your affair, including some interesting conversations about me, my business, my vulnerabilities. Dominic lunged forward. You son of a bitch! Sit down! I commanded with such authority that Dominic complied instinctively. Now, here's what's going to happen. Laurel has already provided a complete confession, implicating everyone involved in your little conspiracy. You, Dominic, will do the same. And if I refuse? Then this footage goes to every board member, investor, and business associate you have left, along with evidence of your attempted corporate espionage, which I remind you, is actually illegal. Dominic's face contorted with rage and desperation. What do you want me to say? Everything. Every detail, every plan, every accomplice. For the next hour, I recorded Dominic's confession, occasionally prompting with questions that revealed the depth of my knowledge about their schemes. When Dominic finally fell silent, emotionally drained, I nodded in satisfaction. And now, I said quietly, the moment you've both been waiting for. Vincent, Laurel began, a pleading note in her voice. My wife, I said, my voice taking on a theatrical quality, said I've been sleeping with your business partner for months. It's liberating to finally tell you. I replied. I know. Go on, tell me more. She said. Why aren't you angry? Finally I said. Because your lover doesn't know his company now belongs to me. His house is foreclosed, and your sister, who covered for you, is now jobless. A heavy silence fell over the room. Dominic stared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear, while Laurel seemed to collapse in on herself. That's it? Dominic finally asked. You brought us here for this performance? No, I replied, standing. I brought you here to witness the beginning of the end. Tomorrow, both of your confessions will be delivered to select individuals. By week's end, everyone in our circle will know exactly what you've done and to whom. You'll destroy yourself in the process, Dominic warned. This kind of scandal will hurt Meridian. A calculated risk, and one I'm prepared to take. My smile was terrifying in its calmness. Sometimes, to remove a cancer, one must cut deeply. As security escorted Dominic from the property, I turned to Laurel. As for you, my dear wife, I suggest you pack whatever personally belongs to you. The divorce papers will arrive tomorrow. You'll find the terms ungenerous. Vincent, please, she began. The only reason you're not leaving this house penniless tonight is because even my lawyers couldn't completely circumvent Arizona's community property laws. But rest assured, your settlement will reflect the true value of your contribution to this marriage. Left alone in my study, I poured another drink and watched the security footage of Dominic being driven off my property. Phase 1 was complete. The betrayers had been exposed, confronted, and broken. But my revenge was far from finished. Ashes and dust 3 months after the confrontation, Phoenix society still buzzed with whispers about the Nielsen-Falco scandal. I had released the confession strategically, ensuring maximum damage to both Laurel and Dominic, while preserving Meridian's reputation through carefully worded press releases about unfortunate personal matters, and moving forward with renewed focus. Dominic had fled Arizona entirely. His attempts to rebuild elsewhere hampered by the toxic reputation that somehow preceded him to each new city. Last I heard, the man was reduced to working as a sales associate at a mid-tier real estate firm in Albuquerque, living in a rented apartment, and driving a leased Honda. A spectacular fall for someone who had once commanded boardrooms and lived in luxury. Laurel had fared marginally better, retreating to a modest condo purchased with her divorce settlement, the bare minimum my lawyers couldn't prevent her from receiving. Her sister Melissa had returned to Phoenix only to find herself unemployable in our industry. My influence, ensuring that doors remained firmly closed to both women. I, myself, had emerged from the scandal largely unscathed. My ruthless handling of the betrayal earned me a fearsome new reputation among Phoenix's elite. No one crossed Vincent Nielsen and survived intact. The lesson had been thoroughly learned. On a crisp October morning, I sat in my favorite breakfast spot, reviewing architectural plans for my next development when a shadow fell across my table. "Mind if I join you?" The woman's voice carried a familiar melody that made me look up sharply. Laurel's mother, Patricia Blackwell, stood before me, elegant as always, in a tailored pantsuit that belied her 65 years. "Patricia." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "This is unexpected." She settled herself gracefully, ordering coffee before turning her attention fully to her former son-in-law. "I thought it was time we spoke," she said, her blue eyes, so like Laurel's, studying me intently. "About my daughters." She accepted the coffee, adding a precise amount of cream. "Both of whom are barely functioning human beings now, thanks to you." I smiled thinly. "Your daughters made choices, Patricia. Adult choices with adult consequences. Vindictive consequences engineered by you." She sipped her coffee calmly. "Melissa can't even get an interview in this city. Laurel jumps at shadows. Was destroying them so completely necessary?" "Yes." The simplicity of my answer seemed to surprise her. "Betrayal in my world comes with comprehensive penalties." Patricia regarded me thoughtfully. "You know, when Laurel first brought you home, I warned her about you. I said men who control their emotions that tightly are dangerous when they finally break. Perceptive." She didn't listen. She saw only the successful, handsome man who wanted her, not the wounded boy beneath. My expression hardened. "If you've come to psychoanalyze me, this conversation is over. I've come to ask you to stop." Patricia leaned forward. "You've won, Vincent. They're broken. Isn't that enough? Laurel is still receiving alimony. Melissa still owns her home. Dominic still draws breath. So no, it's not enough." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "What more could you possibly want? Justice has no end point, Patricia. It simply continues until balance is restored. This isn't justice," she whispered. "It's vengeance. The distinction matters only to those without power to enforce either." I gathered my plans, signaling the end of our conversation. "Give my regards to your daughters. Tell them I think of them often." The threat implicit in my words made Patricia pale. As I walked away, leaving cash for both our coffees, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The Blackwell family had learned a valuable lesson, one my own father had learned too late. In this world, the weak were destroyed by the strong, and I had decided long ago which I would be. Back at Meridian's headquarters, I reviewed the latest reports on Dominic's continued downfall. His former partner had been terminated from even his modest position in Albuquerque after anonymous concerns about his ethics had reached management. My executive assistant, Trevor Walsh, entered with the afternoon schedule. Trevor, hired for his pathological attention to detail and complete lack of personal connection to anyone at Meridian. "The meeting with Apex Development is confirmed for 3, Trevor noted. "Their CEO seemed quite anxious to speak with you personally." I allowed myself a small smile. Apex, the very company Dominic had conspired with against me, was now struggling after losing several key projects to Meridian. Their CEO's request for a meeting reeked of desperation. "Perfect," I replied. "And the other matter?" "Completed this morning. Miss Porter's mortgage application was denied by all 4 banks as arranged. Her current lease expires in 30 days. Melissa's attempt to purchase a small home in Tucson, far from my sphere of influence, had been her latest effort to rebuild, an effort I had quietly ensured would fail. Some might call my continued pursuit of vengeance excessive. I considered it thorough. The people who had betrayed me needed to understand that their punishment had no expiration date, that my memory and reach were infinite. That evening, as I worked late in my office, my private line rang, a number known to very few. "Nielsen," I answered. "It's Benjamin." My lawyer's voice sounded strained. "There's something you should know. Dominic Falco committed suicide this afternoon." My hand stilled on the pen I'd been holding, but my voice remained steady. "Details. Gunshot. In his apartment in Albuquerque. He left a note naming you specifically, Vincent. This could get messy." "Handle it," I replied simply. Make sure any investigation concludes quickly and quietly. After hanging up, I walked to the window, gazing out at the Phoenix skyline I'd helped shape. Dominic's death should have felt like the culmination of my revenge, a victory to be savored. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. Not from guilt. I didn't experience that particular emotion. Rather, from the anticlimactic nature of Dominic's final surrender. The man had escaped the full measure of my planned retribution by taking matters into his own hands. It was, I reflected, the first and only time Dominic had successfully outmaneuvered me. Blood ties I hadn't expected to see Laurel again. The divorce had been finalized, our assets divided, grossly in my favor, and our social circles had zero overlaps since I'd methodically excluded her from Phoenix society. Yet here she stood in the lobby of Meridian Properties, looking thinner than I remembered, her once lustrous hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. Miss Blackwell. Trevor addressed her coldly, using her maiden name as I had instructed all staff to do. You don't have an appointment. I need 5 minutes, Laurel replied, her eyes fixed on me as I emerged from the elevator. Please. I considered simply walking past her, but curiosity won out. 5 minutes, I agreed, gesturing toward a small conference room off the lobby. Once inside, with the door closed against curious eyes, Laurel's composure crumpled. Dominic is dead because of you. Dominic is dead because of Dominic, I corrected, remaining standing while she sank into a chair. His choices led him there. You drove him to it. The constant pressure, the blacklisting, the consequences. I interrupted. Nothing more. Laurel stared at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. What happened to you? What made you this way? Life happened, Laurel. Reality happened. I checked my watch. You have 3 minutes remaining. She took a deep breath, visibly gathering herself. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air. Between us, momentarily disrupting my implacable calm. Pregnant. Her hand moved protectively to her still flat stomach. It's Dominic's. I processed this unexpected development with rapid calculations. And you're telling me this because I have nothing left, she admitted, her voice breaking. My reputation is destroyed. My savings are nearly gone. My family can barely support themselves, let alone help me. I can't raise this child alone. You want money? My voice was flat. I want peace, Laurel corrected. For this child, for me, for what's left of my family. Name your price, Vincent. What will it take for you to end this vendetta? I studied her, this broken version of the woman I'd once desired enough to marry. Her pregnancy complicated matters, introducing an innocent party into the equation. One who carried Dominic's blood, but bore no responsibility for his sins. The child changes nothing, I said finally. Your suffering is the consequence of your choices, not my vindictiveness. Then why continue pursuing Melissa? Why block my mother's business loan last month? Why have Dominic fired from a job that posed no threat to you? Because examples must be made. Because betrayal demanded complete retribution. Because Vincent Nielsen never left enemies with the capacity to rise again. I looked at my watch. You have 1 minute left. Instead of answering, Laurel stood, dignity reasserting itself through her desperation. Then I'll use it to tell you this, I'm having this baby. And someday when they're old enough to understand, I'll tell them exactly who their father was and exactly who destroyed him. I'll tell them about the great Vincent Nielsen who built an empire but couldn't bear a personal slight without scorching the earth in response. Threats don't become you, Laurel. It's not a threat, it's a promise. Her eyes held mine steadily. You may control everything else, but you can't control what I teach Dominic's child about you. After she left, I remained in the conference room, turning this new development over in my mind. A child. Dominic's legacy continuing despite the man's destruction. The notion disturbed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. That evening, I visited the cemetery where my father was buried. I rarely came here, finding little value in communing with the dead. But today felt different. Standing before the simple headstone, I remembered the day I'd found my father hanging in our garage after losing everything to his treacherous business partner. I remembered the foreclosure notice on the kitchen table, the empty bank accounts, the shattered dreams. Most of all, I remembered my 16-year-old self vowing that I would never be vulnerable again, that I would become so powerful that betrayal would be unthinkable, and if it occurred, my retribution would be biblical. I kept my promise. I told the silent grave. No one takes from me without paying the ultimate price. But as the desert wind whipped around me, I confronted an uncomfortable truth. My vengeance, however complete, hadn't filled the void created by betrayal. It hadn't restored what was taken. It had simply created more emptiness, more destruction, more echoing absence. The revelation didn't soften me. Vincent Nielsen was beyond such transformation. But it did clarify something. The child Laurel carried represented a future beyond this cycle of betrayal and revenge. A future I, myself, would never have, having long ago decided that children represented a vulnerability I couldn't afford. Back at my penthouse, I made a call to Benjamin. I need you to set up a trust, anonymously funded, for the benefit of Laurel Blackwell's unborn child. My attorney's surprise was audible. Vincent, are you sure? The child didn't betray me, I said simply. Make the arrangements. It wasn't mercy. I didn't believe in mercy. It was simply my acknowledgement that vengeance, like everything else, had its proper limits. Indelible Incorporated. 1 year after Dominic's suicide, I stood at the pinnacle of my success. Meridian Properties had expanded into 3 new states. The Westlake development had doubled in value, and my personal fortune had increased accordingly. The scandal that had once threatened to destabilize my empire had instead become a cautionary tale in business circles. Cross Vincent Nielsen, and prepare for annihilation. My reputation for ruthlessness had become an asset, intimidating competitors and ensuring absolute loyalty from employees who witnessed firsthand the consequences of betrayal. On this particular morning, I reviewed surveillance photos my private investigator had delivered. Laurel, 7 months after giving birth, pushing a stroller through a park in Portland, Oregon, her mother walking beside her, apparently having relocated to support her daughter. Melissa, working at a small marketing firm that remained safely outside my sphere of influence. The Blackwell women had finally understood the fundamental rule: stay far away from Vincent Nielsen's world, and perhaps you might be permitted to rebuild some semblance of a life. The trust one had established for Dominic's child, a boy named Alexander, according to my sources, would ensure the child's education and basic needs without ever revealing my involvement. Not mercy, but a calculated decision to end the bloodline of vengeance with my generation. Trevor knocked and entered, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. Mr. Nielsen, there's a Detective Morales here to see you. He says it's regarding Harrison Abernathy. I frowned. Harrison Abernathy had been the concierge who facilitated Laurel and Dominic's hotel meetings, one of the many enablers I had systematically ruined over the past year. Send him in. Detective Gabriel Morales entered with the confident stride of a man comfortable with his authority. Mr. Nielsen, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. What's this about, Detective? Harrison Abernathy was found dead in his apartment last night. Apparent suicide, though we're investigating all possibilities. My expression remained neutral. Unfortunate, but I failed to see the connection to me. Mr. Abernathy left a rather detailed note. Morales continued, studying me carefully, naming you as the architect of his downfall. Similar, in fact, to the note Dominic Falco left last year. People in difficult circumstances often look for someone to blame, I replied smoothly. I haven't seen or spoken to Abernathy in over a year. And yet, Morales persisted, he lost his job at the Westmont Hotel the day after your divorce was finalized. Subsequently found himself blacklisted from every hospitality position in the state. And recently lost his apartment when the building was purchased by a subsidiary of. He checked his notes. High Point Holdings. Business transactions that affected Mr. Abernathy peripherally are hardly my responsibility. Morales smiled thinly. Mr. Nielsen, I've spent the morning reviewing similar patterns surrounding several individuals connected to your ex-wife and former business partner. The systematic destruction of their lives shows a remarkable consistency. Coincidences happen, Detective. Not like this. Morales leaned forward. I'm going to be looking very closely at these coincidences. Mr. Nielsen. Very closely indeed. After the detective left, I remained still, contemplating this unexpected development. Detective Morales represented something I had rarely encountered, someone completely outside my sphere of influence, immune to my money and power, dedicated to uncovering truths I preferred buried. For the first time in years, I faced an adversary I couldn't simply crush through financial or social means. Later that evening at home, I opened my father's old wooden box, one of the few possessions I'd kept from childhood. Inside lay newspaper clippings about his suicide, the bankruptcy filing, and most significantly, a faded photograph of Richard Harmon, his business partner, who had stolen everything and disappeared. I had tracked Harmon down 15 years ago, finding him living comfortably under a new name in Florida. I'd considered various forms of revenge, but ultimately decided on something more elegant. I purchased the man's mortgage through a shell company and simply left it alone, allowing Harmon to live in blissful ignorance that his home, his safety, was actually controlled by the son of the man he destroyed. I had been saving that particular card to play in my darkest moment, when I needed the purest satisfaction revenge could offer. I'd imagined confronting Harmon, revealing myself, watching recognition and fear dawn on the man's face before destroying him completely. Now, with Detective Morales investigating, that long-planned revenge might need to serve a different purpose. The next morning, I contacted Benjamin with new instructions. By evening, Richard Harmon's comfortable retirement had been upended by a foreclosure notice, followed by IRS audit notifications and the sudden freezing of his accounts. 2 days later, I received the news. Richard Harmon had suffered a fatal heart attack while arguing with bank officials about his suddenly dire financial situation. When Detective Morales returned the following week, I was prepared. "I've been looking into your past, Mr. Nielsen." Morales began without preamble. "Specifically, your father's suicide after being defrauded by his business partner." "Ancient history," I replied evenly. "Not so ancient. Richard Harmon died last week under circumstances reminiscent of your other projects." I slid a folder across the desk. "Perhaps this will clarify matters, Detective." Inside were documents proving that I had only learned of Harmon's whereabouts the day before his death after decades of searching. Bank records showing I had been in Phoenix when the foreclosure was initiated. Witness statements from Florida confirming Harmon's history of heart problems. All fabricated, of course, but flawlessly. "You've been very thorough," Morales commented, examining the documents. "I've been very wrongly accused," I corrected. "My father's suicide shaped my life, Detective. Finding Harmon was a mission I pursued for decades. The timing of his death robbed me of closure, not provided it. It was the perfect deflection. Using a truth, my father's suicide, to cover a lie, my innocence in Harmon's death. The emotional resonance made the deception impenetrable. Morales eventually left, suspicions intact, but evidence lacking. I had successfully muddied the waters, creating enough reasonable doubt to protect myself from legal consequences. In the months that followed, I gradually scaled back my active pursuit of those who had betrayed me. Not from any newfound mercy, but from the pragmatic recognition that Detective Morales represented a variable I couldn't fully control. The trust for Dominic's son remained in place, a silent acknowledgement that vengeance had natural boundaries. Laurel and her family were permitted to rebuild their lives in distant Oregon, provided they never returned to Phoenix or spoke publicly about me. As for me, I continued building my empire, colder and more isolated than ever. The betrayal had confirmed my fundamental belief: trust was for fools, love was for the weak, and power alone ensured survival. On the 5th anniversary of Dominic's death, I stood in my penthouse office, watching the sun set over Phoenix. My revenge had been comprehensive, my enemies destroyed or neutralized, my power greater than ever. Yet the hollowness remained, the space where connection might have existed, where forgiveness might have offered a different kind of peace. I acknowledge this absence dispassionately, not as a flaw, but simply as the cost of absolute control. I raised my glass to the darkening sky, a toast to lessons learned and prices paid. The Nielsen doctrine remained unchanged and unforgiving: betray me, and I will destroy not just you, but everything and everyone you hold dear. Not from passion or pain, but from principle. In the end, Vincent Nielsen had become exactly what life had taught him to be, a man who could not be betrayed twice, because he never, ever forgot, and never, ever forgave. So, after hearing all this, tell me, honestly, do you think I went too far? Or when everything you've built is torn down by betrayal, is any price too high for true justice? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to know what you think.